But now, moving on to our first debate today, should the most evil criminals face the death penalty? 0207 862 2222 is the number you need. So please do get your calls coming in. It's such an important talk to have, really. I think we need to talk about it. On Friday, nurse Lucy Letby was found guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 6 more at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Letby is refusing to attend her sentencing, which is happening this morning, basically. And that comes as the government saying they're looking to change this. She can refuse, the judge can't force her, but the government are looking to change the way that criminals are going to be forced to actually attend their sentencing, because it's appalling how they're not, isn't it, really? Now, Lucy Letby has been named as the worst serial killer of British modern history of babies and children, and there have to be calls to bring back the death penalties for this particular case. The last time the penalty was used was back in 1964 when 2 men were convicted of murder. But shortly after, capital punishment for murder was abolished in 1969 and then entirely in 1998, but isn't that long ago. So should the government consider bringing it back for the worst criminals? And I think Lucy Letby certainly qualifies in this category, doesn't she? Let's find out what our panel think on this one. Henry, it's not an easy subject to talk about. It's a horrific story, and our thoughts are so much with the parents of those babies.
Yeah, of course, and they should be.
It's absolutely awful. But what do you make of this call for the death penalty to be reintroduced?
Well, this is something that happens whenever there's a really appalling crime, a vicious murder, a serial killer, because you think these people must be evil and they're beyond rehabilitation. You know, we have a criminal justice system that got rid of the death penalty back in 1965. And one of the reasons was for the miscarriage of justice of Timothy Evans, who was convicted of killing his wife. Remember 10 Rillington Place?
Yes, of course, yeah, absolutely.
John Reginald Halliday Christie who did it. And one of the problems is that you can never be 100% sure in every single case that you've got the right person. So apart from the rehabilitation and the fact that nowhere in Europe implements the death penalty.
Only one country in Europe,
which is
Belarus.
Belarus, right, well...
Not exactly a great club you want to join, I understand that, but...
You know, and then that's for obvious reasons, you know. Countries in Europe say, well, we believe in the individual, we believe in rehabilitation. We point the finger at the likes of Saudi Arabia, where they do execute people on a near industrial level, and Singapore. And also, when you look at the miscarriages of justice over the years, there's the University of Exeter Law School has done a study. There have been 450 miscarriages of justice that they've been able to tabulate, of which 150 are for murder. And these are people who were convicted of murder and let out. And most of the reasons are for this. A, unreliable evidence, witness evidence. But B, when you consider forensic evidence, you think it is beyond dispute. But in about 23% of the cases, it is dodgy forensic evidence. And also about 21% of the cases, it's to do with agents of the state who have not disclosed the information. If you look at the case of Andrew Malkinson, who was sent to prison and served 17 years.
Accused of rape, yep, absolutely.
Of course, in some countries they would have killed him, right? Yeah. He was innocent, and the state knew he was innocent, and it didn't bring forward the evidence.
But Lizzie, in cases where we know 100% there is no doubt that someone has committed an awful, awful crime, is the death penalty worth considering?
I can understand people that are talking about it today for this monster. I can't even say her name, and it's just too horrific for words. But I have to say, I don't believe we can kill. I mean, this woman must be psychotic. Can we really give?
She has been described as a psychopath.
A psychopath.
Yes.
So can we give her the death penalty? Being a you know, she's despicable. But I feel a worse crime is to lock her away, never let her see the light of day. That is crime enough. I don't believe in an eye for an eye. I am of Christian belief, I mean, no one can. It's too disturbing for words. And now we're hearing that there could be more. And what I feel very strongly, because I get so upset with lessons to be learned. Well, you know what? Lessons should have been learned already. We've had Beverly Elvick, we've had Harold Shipman, and now we've got this inquiry, which is going to take for ages. And then those that should have gone up and, you know, and done something about this, should be prosecuted, but it's going to take forever.
Well,
and, you know, look what with Harold Shipman case,
Yeah.
that the inquiry took so long that, you know, the people they wanted to talk to had either moved on, you know, or they were no longer alive. And this is it. And it is so unfair for the poor families.
Well,
it really is.
The other sentiment.
But she should be made to go to court.
Yeah.
She should be in the dock today.
Right, OK, let's find out what our next guest thinks about this. I want to speak to former Police and Crime Commissioner for Surrey, Kevin Hurley. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, obviously, you know that the horrific story. So would you actually bring back the death penalty for Lucy Letby?
Well, I think the first presenter makes a very interesting point in terms of avoiding miscarriages of justice. But I think there's a couple of issues here. And the first one is, in fact, the way in which evidence is gathered has moved on significantly from even the most recent appalling miscarriage of justice for the chap wrongly convicted of rape, which was mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But I think there is an issue here about when are people so evil that society demands that justice is seen to be done in the strongest possible means. And whilst it's a difficult, if you like, issue to deal with, there are some people, such as this woman, who has murdered 7 tiny babies in extremely painful circumstances for the children, seriously brain damaged others, has caused 7 consultants to be put through the mill and be compromised, have wasted a year of public money and many millions. When is a person so bad that society actually needs to see, frankly, an infliction of the ultimate sanction? Now, it is correct, we would be an outlier amongst all the other European nations if the death penalty came back. But you know what? The world is moving on. There are many, many powerful nations moving into what might be called first world status who still possess that, because there are some people who are so evil that perhaps deserve it.
Kevin.
So for me, former police officer Wayne Couzens, we all know what he did to Sarah Everard, he's a classic case that I think would be deserving of the death penalty. And I'll put my hand on my heart and say, I personally would execute him myself. That might be because I'm allowing emotion to come in, because as a former police officer, I think what he did was dreadful. But what this lady or woman is doing, she's bringing shame upon tens of thousands of wonderful nurses up and down the country. And because she's a psychopath, she's exploited all the goodwill that nurses generally had to carry on with what you're doing. So in short, I think there is a case for considering, with the most firm safeguards, checks and balances, that in the most appropriate cases of psychopaths, we consider whether or not we should introduce the death penalty.
Kevin, thank you very much for now. Stay with us, because you have very, very strong opinions and express your argument incredibly well.